Ghost University. Today I'm going to talk about part 2 of my 16 Crucified Saviors video, which was a part of A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And we're going to look at the 16 Crucified Saviors from the viewpoint of an atheist named Richard Carrier. And Richard Carrier, being an atheist, knows about the work and has read the work of Kersey Graves, but he says he's very unreliable and he would never use Kersey Graves' work to defend why he doesn't believe in the Bible. So even with him being an atheist, and I'm not going to say a hater of God, but he definitely isn't, he doesn't believe in the truth of the Bible or Jesus living, and he would never use the work of Kersey Graves, who talks about 16 crucified saviors, to defend why he, as Richard Carrier, doesn't believe in the Lord. So let's get to it. I'm not sure who this work came from, but I've heard Graves, or I've heard Carrier, give an explanation of why Graves is useless. And this person said this is a conflation of emails. The editor of this particular webpage said that it's a conflation of emails that him and Carrier had together about 16 crucified saviors. But in the reading it says the world's 16 crucified saviors, or Christianity before Christ, is unreliable, but no comprehensive critique exists. Most scholars immediately recognize many of his findings as unsupported and dismiss Graves as useless. After all, a scholar who rarely cites a source isn't useful to have as a reference, even if he is right. For examples of specific problems, however, see Hair Jesus, Christianity's Hindu Heritage, and some generally but poor, but not always incorrect Christian rebuttals. A very helpful discussion on related methodological problems by renowned scholar Bruce Metzger is also well worth reading. Methodology in the Study of the Mystery Religions and Early Christianity, 2002. In general, even when the evidence is real, it often only appears many years after Christianity began, and thus might be evidence of diffusion in the other direction. Another typical problem is that Graves draws far too much from what often amounts to rather vague evidence. In general, there are 10 kinds of problems that crop up in Graves' work, here and there. I want to go back and revisit the thing about even when the evidence is real, it only appears many years after Christianity began. Meaning, people claim Christianity stole from other religions. But the fact of the matter is that Christianity didn't steal from anybody. Everybody stole from Christianity. Even if Christianity didn't have a title, it stole from the ways and the thoughts and style of Christianity before it had that term attached to it. Because nowhere in the Bible can you find Christianity. You can't even find Christian. It's a word that we've all used. It's like a colloquialism, where it's a word that everybody understands. Worldwide, really. Colloquialisms are really local, but it's something that people understand worldwide as a word referring to something that we all understand, even though it's not technically a word. And that's really what Christianity is. It's a word we all use to refer to something, as in people who follow the Holy Bible, but not a word that's actually used in the text. Reading on, here are the 10 ways in which his evidence in general is bogus and or causes problems. So number 1 is Graves often does not distinguish his opinions and theories from what his sources and evidence actually state. So he takes the truth and he stretches it long in order to support his opinion. Why does he do that? Because if he told the truth, people would know he was lying. Number 2, Graves often omits important sources and evidence. Why? Because if he gave his sources and the evidence to support the things that he says, much like the first one, people would find out that he was lying. Graves often mistreats in a biased or anachronistic way the sources he does use. Anachronistic means he's basically moving things in and out of time periods in which they really don't belong. In other words, his chronology is screwy. Because if he did have the right type of chronology and put things where they belong, people would find out sooner than later that he was lying. Graves occasionally relies on suspect sources. In other words, sources, again, that probably don't give primary or secondary sources, which would make him out, again, to be a liar. Graves does little or no source analysis or formal textual criticism because he can't criticize things or analyze them correctly, because if he did, people would find out he was lying. That's why when real scholars go look at his information, they're like, his associations just aren't there. You know, he wants to have one lead to two and then two to three, but he has no real source analysis or textual criticism to show you how these things relate to each other or why something doesn't exist. Moving on, what are we on now? 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6. Graves' work is totally uninformed by modern social history, a field that did not begin to be formally pursued until after World War II, after Graves died. Right. So modern science isn't supporting this garbage either, and neither did anybody back in the day. Or very few people. Let me say that. Very few people. Graves' conclusions and theories often far exceed what the evidence justifies, and he treats both speculation and sound theories as of equal value. So, again, speculation is just as good as the truth. There's no need to go search for the truth. It's like being guilty in the court of public opinion before you actually go to court. So he's calling it guilty without having went to court, okay? And he stretches the truth and applies whatever he wants to the evidence. Number 8. Graves often ignores important questions of chronology and the actual order of plausible historical influence and completely disregards the methodological problems this creates. So, and again, without going too far into this, if he did do this, if he had the chronology right, he would be a liar. Or say, well, why does baptism exist in Christianity before it did in Islam? Okay? I mean, in Islam, I'm pretty sure people don't get baptized, but you get the point. He just moves things all over the place just to support his ideas. Number 9, Graves' work lacks all humility, which is unconscionable given the great uncertainties that surround the sketchy material he had to work with. And number 10, Graves' scholarship is obsolete, having been vastly improved upon by new methods, materials, discoveries, and textual criticism in the century since he worked. In fact, almost every historical work written before 1950 is regarded as outdated and untrustworthy by historians today. I wouldn't take number 10 to mean that we don't trust old historical sources, because this could kind of mean that the Bible is out of date as well, because people want to use sociology or psychology to be sciences that, since we believe that people can do whatever they want nowadays, makes it so you shouldn't have to listen to the Lord. And so we shouldn't be doing that with old sources or even old science. A lot of old science and or ways of living validate the Bible. So we can't just be saying anything before 1950 is just regarded as outdated. And to a certain degree, I understand what he's saying, but I don't completely agree with that. So, also, the reading further states, all this is not to say Graves did not have some things right, but you will never be able to tell what he has right from what he has wrong without totally redoing all his research and beyond, which makes him utterly useless to historians as a source. For example, almost all his sources on Krishna, long post-date Christian Nestorian influence on India. No pre-Christian texts on Krishna contain the details crucial to his case, apart from those few that were common among many gods everywhere. Can you tell from graves which details are attested by earlier evidence and which by late? That's the problem. You know, Graves was just somebody ultimately, in my eye, who just didn't believe in the scriptures, and he didn't want other people to believe in them either. When your when your evidence is faulty and nobody believes it, not even an atheist, you're in trouble. And also here where it says that apart from those few that were common among gods everywhere, because those stories that we talked about in the 16 crucified saviors and or the hero with 1,000 faces are everywhere. You can't avoid them. And that's why those stories got to be common everywhere. And like I always go back to is the story of Babel and what happened there. And how once everybody separated, they had to come up with their own religious thoughts about things in their own languages. And through that is how we get to where we are today, with everyone having these stories that cross off over into each other and do indeed mostly sound the same. That's why it's like that. Because at the Tower of Babel, God separated everybody and sent them on their way and established the boundaries for them thereof. And now they have to redo their religion, but they weren't redoing it in the way of the original. They twisted up the story, but that's the devil who did that. And I'm going to show how Justin Martyr thought about those early religions as well, because he also thought that the devil did it. Next on the agenda is the idea that Christ was born on December 25th. On the other side of the coin, consider his emphasis on the December 25th birth date as a common feature. This is one of the things he gets right, at least regarding Greco-Roman religion. All gods associated with the sun shared the sun's birthday. Erroneously identified as December 25th, it is actually the 21st. But for Jesus, we can actually trace when and why Jesus was assigned this birthday for political reasons in the 4th century, 300 years after Christianity began. Graves seems oblivious to the distinction between the origin of Christianity and its subsequent development. Yet no Christian in the beginning believed Jesus was born on December 25th, but Graves obscures this fact, leading to the false conclusion about the origins of the Christ story. So, again, he gets some things right, but he uses them in the wrong way. Can you tell them when, or can you tell when? That's a problem too. Again, nobody ever in the Bible or anything that I've read associated with the Bible, breakdowns of the Bible, commentaries on the Bible, have ever mentioned Christ's birthday being on December 25th. Why? Because nobody really knows what day it was. Nor did Jesus himself go around celebrating his birthday. None of the disciples ever ran up to him with a gift. Not saying gift giving on birthdays was a thing back then. Although I'm pretty sure in some cultures they were giving gifts on people's birthday. Without even really knowing that. I'm pretty sure. But just the idea that Christ was born on December 25th is a lie. And it was done by Constantine. So pagan Rome would want to join into Christianity. That's the political reason. He wanted power over his people. And so he merged with the Christians in order so they would really get together with pagan Rome so they could have a more unified front. That's why and who assigned Christ that December 25th birthday. Because in the beginning he never had that. And kudos to Richard Carrier, who was able to see and not identify the tradition of man with the truth of Christ, that Christ was not born on December 25th. The next thing we see here is that Justin wrote in his dialogue of Justin and Trypho, the Jew, 69 to 70. Be well assured then, Trypho, that I am established in the knowledge of and faith in the Scriptures by those counterfeits which he who is called the devil is said to have performed among the Greeks, just as some were wrought by the Magi in Egypt, and others by the false prophets in Elijah's days. For when they tell that Bacchus, son of Jupiter, was begotten by intercourse with Semele, and that he was the discoverer of the wine, the discoverer of the vine, and when they relate that being torn in pieces and having died, he rose again and ascended to heaven. And when they introduce wine into his mysteries, do I not perceive that the devil has imitated the prophecy announced by the patriarch Jacob and recorded by Moses? And when they tell that Hercules was strong and traveled all over the world and was begotten by Jove or Alcimene and ascended to heaven when he died, do I not perceive that the scripture which speaks of Christ, strong as a giant to run his race, has been in like manner imitated? And when the devil brings forward Asclepius as the raiser of the dead and healer of all diseases, may I not say that in this manner likewise he has imitated the prophecies about Christ? And when those who record the mysteries of Mithras say that he was begotten of a rock, and call the place where those who believe in him are initiated a cave, do I not perceive here that the utterance of Daniel, that a stone without hands was cut of a great mountain, has been imitated by them, and that they have attempted likewise to imitate the whole of Isaiah's words? In the documentary or the movie that they put together called Zeitgeist, under the heading of The Greatest Lie Ever Told, when he said Justin Martyr claims the devil did it, well, that is indeed what Justin Martyr claimed. But they didn't tell you how he spoke about Persephone or Dionysus or Zamaxis or Inanna or Attis or any of these other people. They just simply said that he said the devil did it, which means if he backed up his statement with everything that Justin said, then perhaps you wouldn't be willing to believe that Justin Martyr was full of it, because that's what he's trying to tell us, is that Justin was full of it. But I don't believe that at all. All right? Justin told the truth by saying that the devil has emulated the stories of the scriptures. Before the scriptures became print, the devil was already manipulating the truth of the scriptures. That's really where we're going with this. The devil manipulated the truth of the scriptures. Why? Because he's already aware of what the Lord has planned. Because in the beginning, he was with the Lord until he got kicked out of heaven by Michael, the archangel. And so he should have knowledge. And so should the fallen angels that went with him out of heaven. Because when Lucifer was exiled out of heaven, he took a third of the angels with him. All these angels are already aware of what's going on. So, I believe Justin Martyr was correct. And continuing with the reading, there are only a couple sections left, and I'm going to read through this without any real breakdown. It says, the only case that I know of pre-Christian God actually being crucified and then resurrected is Inanna. For those of you who are familiar with hip-hop, and I think Little Kim says she's got that Il Nana, right? So when I say that they are replaying the mysteries in front of us, Little Kim is Inanna. Continuing, also known as Ishtar, a Sumerian goddess whose crucifixion, resurrection, and escape from the underworld is told in a cuneiform tablets inscribed century 1500 BCE, attesting to a very old tradition. The best account and translation of the text is to be found in Samuel Kramer's History Begins at Sumer, page 154 FF. And if that doesn't say FF, forgive me. I have bad vision, but it is what it is. But be sure to use the third revised edition, 1981, since the text was significantly revised after new discoveries were made. For instance, the tablet was once believed to describe the resurrection of Inanna's lover, Tammuz, also known as the Muzi. And again, these gods and the old myths of people consistently cross over, and you'll be amazed when you go back and look at what the mysteries really mean about Tammuz and the weeping for Tammuz, because that Christian cross that people wear is really it really means they're weeping for Tammuz, but they want Tammuz to be the god of the scriptures, when clearly he isn't when you break down who Tammuz was. Reading on, Graves thus mistakenly lists Tammuz as one of his 16 crucified saviors. Of course, Graves cannot be discredited for this particular era, since in his day scholars still thought the tablet referred to that god. Kramer explains how this mistake happened. Reading on, there is great need of new work in this area. There really is a huge gap in modern scholarship here. This is one of the few subjects untouched by the post-World War II historiographical revolution. Most scholars today consider the subject dead. Why do they consider it dead? Because they can't really discredit the Bible. They look for it. You know, when you watch Ancient Aliens and all those things that they have on the History Channel, they try and discredit the Bible. But most real scholars don't try and do that. Even if they kind of believe the Bible isn't true, they can't find historical evidence to support the fact that the Bible isn't true. And that's why they really don't bother. Reading on, most scholars today consider the subject dead, largely for all the wrong reasons. And there is little hope. The subject is stuck in a no man's land between history and religious studies, whose methods and academic cultures are so radically different they can barely communicate with each other, much less cooperate on a common project like this. Why can't they do that? Because people that support the Bible and scientists who support the Bible are against each other. Because if it came down to supporting the flood, you can find scientists who support the flood, the great flood of the Bible, where Noah went into the ark. People can support that argument, and then others don't. And that's what he means. He doesn't know who to believe. Do you believe the Christian who says, hey, I can find in the fact that we have the Grand Canyon, and the Grand Canyon is separated into layers of rock, that the Grand Canyon means that there was a huge flood back in the day. But one person says that the layers of the Grand Canyon represent a flood that happened over time. And the other scientist says it represents a huge flood at once. Not over time, but at once. Moving on. When I embarked on researching this stuff 10 years ago, this actually partly launched my interest in history as a profession. I found it excruciatingly hard to find anything on the subject. He can't find anything because most scholars don't deal with it. Either you believe in the scriptures or you don't. But for you not to believe in them, it really takes a huge leap. Because you'll see things in the scriptures that'll make you believe in them. Without a doubt. And the others who just don't, they don't because they don't want to answer for their sins. Reading on, most of the relevant material that is worth reading anyway is buried piecemeal in academic journals or chapters in obscure, out-of-print books. At the time, I ended up with no recourse but to personally contact experts worldwide, item by item. So he went through Kersey Graves' book, and he called all the modern experts and people who were at the universities, and they made him realize that Kersey Graves was a liar. It shouldn't take all of that, because I know that this guy, Carrier, can see the works of the Lord. He just refuses to recognize him. Finishing up, I haven't seen any improvement since then. I have personally acquired a great deal of expertise in the related subjects, but only after a decade of hardcore exposure to source material and other historical studies. I have never seen any attempt to get all this experience into one book, and sadly, though I have a growing file for a possible future book, I have no plans to work on this anytime soon because he's already known that the truth of the Lord is real. He just hasn't accepted it himself. In any given case, there are sometimes relevant and available books in English that can at least give you enough background to go back and assess what Graves claims, but no direct updates of his work because all the modern scholarship says Graves is full of ish. I have addressed more issues related to this question in these other essays. Again, 16 crucified saviors is a lie. If you don't know anything about the scriptures and about mythology and how to connect the dots and how to really look at history, you can be fooled. But even this atheist wasn't fooled by this material. He wasn't fooled. He said, this is garbage. Because everybody he contacted about the validity and the truthfulness of what Graves said didn't match up with what the hell Graves was claiming. So we have to learn to study better and not just listen to people who claim that they know the truth. And this is where these ideas came from. Because that's all they do. Acharya S. I'm going to talk about Acharya S. in future videos. But she likes Kersey Graves' work as well. And even in Zeitgeist, where they did The Greatest Lie Ever Told, Acharya S. is one of their sources. But Acharya S. followed Kersey Graves. So what are we talking about? She doesn't know what the hell she's talking about either. So let's stop following these people and do more research on our own. Ghost University. Thanks for watching the videos.